Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, May 16th, 2025. Double checking to make sure it's May 16th. It is. And today we're going to talk about managing shrub roses, how garlic is so much more than just garlic, and it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, well, happy Friday, everyone. We're looking at, and stop me if you've heard this one, more severe weather across the state this morning, so hopefully everyone is safe. Yesterday, I got another couple of beds of lettuce in and got another couple of beds worth of lettuce started, as well as my first round of watermelons. That's right, I may try for 2 this year because that's my love of watermelons. I have not decided on that yet. I have a few beds I could use for it, but they truly just take up space and make no money, as we've talked about, but they are also my current favorite crop to grow. So decisions, delicious decisions. And anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we discussed how the term regenerative might just be completely lost at this point, and there were loads of great comments on there. I think people are everything from aghast at the idea of chemical residue on regenerative, quote-unquote, crops, to angry because it is not regulated. Genetically engineered crops are not out of bounds in quote-unquote regenerative, to okay with it, as long as the soil is showing improvement. I understand that bureaucracy is annoying, but regulations do serve a highly critical purpose in our society, like keeping stuff meaning what we want it to mean or think it means, and protecting water and air and food and literally everything else around you that you need to survive. So yeah, I guess if we want it to mean anything at all and not everything, we kind of need those regulations sooner rather than later. Also, Monday, we discussed, or rather defined, the term biodiversity, and I liked this from @LizCopic, who wrote, quote, "In Star Trek, IDIC is the Vulcan philosophy that infinite diversity in infinite combinations leads to both truth and beauty, which is one of the things they admire most about the Earth. Our diversity, not only as humans, but also all the types of animals, bugs, plants, and even soil. So biodiversity is 100% the nerdy Vulcan logical thing to do. Farm long and prosper," end quote. You see, the Earth rules. Vulcans even know that. You know, we should keep it that way, maybe. On Tuesday, we discussed seed starting compendiums, and there are a few recommendations in there. @NBarS Microgreens wrote, quote, "I'm a big fan of the new Seed Starters Handbook 2018, updated version by Nancy Bubel and Jean Nick, published by Rodale. While it has a ton of other info, looking at you, table of days to germination by temperature for common crops, the last third of the book is a 150-page encyclopedia of plants to grow from seed. It does cover fruits, veggies, flowers, herbs, and perennials. Of course, it can't cover it all, but it sure does try," end quote. So that's cool. That sounds like a great option among the others that folks mentioned in the comments. Patreon member Lindsay Isbell is one of them. They recommended Ball Culture Guide to the Encyclopedia of Seed Germination by Jim Now as well. So good stuff there. Appreciate those recs, and I'll link them in the show notes. Also on Tuesday, we talked about whether you can sell plant starts and soil blocks, and I liked this from NSBar Microgreens, who mentioned they use compostable pots. Quote, "I really don't like peat or cocoa pots, as roots never seem to penetrate those pots. Cow pots are excellent if you're not certified organic and let them dry out between watering. Otherwise, you get lots of fun fungi. Lately, I have settled on 3.25 by 3.25 inch fertile pots from Johnny's, the 12-cell strip pots. They are a wood pulp pot, OMRI certified, no fungus, and roots bust right through. Fits all the bills. Unfortunately, they cost 30 cents a piece, but at least at my farmer's market where everyone has solo cups or nursery pots, they stand out and people are more than willing to pay the premium to cover these pots," end quote. And also the idea of selling plant starts and solo cups is kind of amusing. I think of solo cups as like Jell-O shots or Kool-Aid or both. Alternatively, I thought this was a good idea too if using compostables or soil blocks isn't in the cards, from Lamb's Quarters Farm, who wrote, quote, "We struggled with the plastic-free seed starter issue this year. Our customers like the big 8-inch starts, so they just wouldn't have the support as a block. We rationalized plastic pots by doing a community call to drop off black pots, which our municipality no longer recycles. The rationale being these pots are already out there, might as well get as much life from them rather than sending to a landfill. It worked really well. The community delivered hundreds of pots, including larger nursery pots, which can cost a lot," end quote. So there you go. That's an idea. Instead of buying a bunch of pots, keep other pots out of the landfills. Though, of course, I might wash them thoroughly for any potential residue. Once again, a good example of how small farming can sometimes be the best form of waste management, affectionately. On Wednesday, I caught you all up on what I was up to here in Kentucky, and in kind asked for what you all were up to, and got a nice snapshot from around the country. At Jason Young 6614 wrote, quote, "Here in Southwest Missouri, Zone 7A, I've just planted all of our beans and sweet sorghum for syrup. I planted our tomatoes 2 weeks ago and peppers last week, waiting now for germination in the seeded things. Going to work in some spinach and lettuce in any gaps that occur," end quote. Then Ursa Major 1936 wrote, quote, "Zone 4, Wisconsin, and the shelling peas are up 2 inches. Apple trees have started to bloom, and the summer birds and butterflies have just returned. Heading to the garden to plant seeds of various root crops," end quote. Then at Corvid Ravenscroft wrote, quote, "I'm in Eugene, Oregon, but my crop of dry farmed garlic is 90 minutes south of here, Zone 8B9A, and it's getting huge. Scapes haven't come onto the hardneck yet, but the plant stalks are already thicker than mature leeks and over 2.5 feet tall. Very much looking forward to our first official crop to be ready to sell in July/August," end quote. Good stuff, y'all. I actually really like hearing what people are up to in the world right now. I'll try to do that every once in a while. I think that's good for everybody who's not in Kentucky to hear what other people who are perhaps in their region are doing. Then finally on Thursday, also known as yesterday, we discussed how difficult it is to advise people on how to grow after one of our dear Patreon members requested a cold climate recap series, which edits or delays and summarizes content by a month-ish in the new year. And I said, that's tough for several reasons. However, at FA Motors wrote, quote, "I think they were meaning more of a Sunday video or compiled deep dives you have done on starting specific crops on the Daily Show about certain crops and post that. Maybe January. I think some playlist you already have in place can cover that as well," end quote. Now, that could totally be possible, but the only issue for us is really just time and capacity to make it happen. However, the more Patreon members that we can get, the more we can do. So as that number continues to grow, expect more stuff. Maybe some compendiums like that. That would be very cool. Great comments and contributions as always, everyone. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the not-so-romantic roses. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Remember, if this show brings you $2 or $5 a month worth of value, consider chipping in. You can do that over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member David Bonell, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse, roses are red, violets are blue. These blooming roses are too much to chew. More seriously, we purchased 7 acres of fallow pasture last summer on Whidbey Island, Washington. 60% is covered with shrub roses. We brush hogged last fall and are now contemplating what is the best way to uproot the roses and level the land from 30 years of erosion. Our goal is to replant the pasture for a few years while we build our family compound farm. Any suggestions between plowing or disking to get the land ready for fall planting of cover crops? Cheers, David," end quote. All right. Thanks, David. Very interesting question here. So although shrub rose encompasses many different plants, these are pretty common wild plants that are not super fun to deal with. Here in Kentucky, we have things like the multiflora rose, and it typically likes to hang out on the edges of the woods or in pastures or under fence rows where it does not see a lot of soil disturbance. It's a pain to deal with once it's established, but it isn't too bad if you can catch it early. And after a few mowings, it usually exhausts itself, which is nice. You know, it doesn't want to deal with getting mowed all the time. Now, I don't know your particular species of shrub rose there, but there are some natives and non-natives in your area. It may be worth identifying which ones, if any of them, are native and keeping a few of those around if they're not too much in the way for those, pollinators and their habitat and birds and all the things that rely on them. Anyway, uprooting rows can be tough, but especially if it's, like you said, like 60% of that pasture, that's a lot. But like I said, mowing several times in those areas can really slow them down quite a bit. Then you can start digging them up, the roots as they resprout. This will likely be a long-term yearly task for a few years to get it fully under control. I also like that you were talking about utilizing the cover crops in there as well. If the roots can't get more energy from their leaves because the cover crops are blocking the sunlight, that will help weaken them tremendously. Now, I do recommend leveling if it's in the budget. If you're on a slope, which I'm assuming when you said leveling that, in erosion, that it's possible, you just won't regret that. Farming on slopes is, as we have discussed many times, not the most fun. In fact, the leveling process can be a good opportunity to get some machinery to dig up those roses too. Just start there. Identify the rose bushes, have the operator lift those out, and you can remove the roses from the field. And then have that operator start the leveling process. However, if you do plan to level it, get the cover crop in there as fast as you can immediately afterwards to lock the soil in place, protect it, suppress weeds, enrich it, all the typical cover crop stuff. I might recommend sorghum Sudan grass and cowpeas to lock that soil in place really quickly. If you do not get heavy rains though, which you may not, then you can take your time a little bit more to germinate the initial flush of weeds, cultivate them out with a power harrow or something that just scuffs the surface, and then plant your cover crop seed to get the whole thing kind of under control without too much weed competition. That cover crop mix I mentioned, sorghum Sudan grass and cowpeas, will also help block the sun for any returning perennials like your shrub rose. Then in the fall, you can start to establish a pasture if that's what you ultimately want it to be, with some grasses and forbs and flowers, or maybe the ultimate goal is to still use it for a garden in a few years, in which case you could just go back and forth with summer and winter cover crops, like summer the sorghum Sudan grass and cowpeas, winter rye and vetch and those sorts of things, which is a fun game to play. Either of those approaches, depending on your scale, may take borrowing a seed drill or potentially just a light disking in of the cover crop residue once you mow it. A lot of different ways you could do it. Anyway, was that helpful? Let me know. Otherwise, it's a quick break, and then we'll talk garlic in all of its many forms. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is also brought to you by Ring of Fire. What if you could turn your brush problem into black gold? The Ring of Fire biochar kiln is your spring tool for soil transformation, converting woody debris into high-quality biochar in just hours. Biochar will kickstart your compost, retain water and nutrients in your soil, and provide habitat for beneficial microbes. Now $19.95 with flat rate shipping. Their spring sale runs through June. Don't wait to boost your soil and optimize your inputs. Visit ringofire.earth/growers now to learn more. Also, for more information on biochar, check out the No-Till Market Garden podcast interview with Kelpie Wilson, inventor of the Ring of Fire kiln, that we will link in the show notes. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20-plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so yesterday after I saw those scapes on the garlic, I thought I would do a little ode to how awesome garlic is and how many different crops we actually get from this plant, because some of those stages will be happening now for you or soon for you, depending on where you are on the planet. So the first stage of garlic is what we call green garlic. This is young garlic that occurs before the garlic has started to produce a bulb. We often plant garlic specifically for green garlic, really densely, usually around our hedgerows and such. Can be a great early spring crop, and planting it densely means that we can pull, large amounts of it without wasting our main patch. We will, though, also sometimes thin our main patch of the smaller ones for green garlic, for the bulbs that are either the doubles or just clearly not going to be as big as the others. This is a harder market item, green garlic, than others I'll talk about, but it is sellable. Chefs absolutely love this stuff, and it's a great CSA item because, like I said, in the spring, when things are kind of slim, this is an awesome one to start filling the basket up. Next up, if you grow a hardneck garlic, is the garlic scape. That's on softneck garlics do not scape. They don't put up a flower. This scape comes around mid-May for us. Later, if you go a little bit further north, and again, you want to pull that as soon as you start to see it pretty much. I like to pull up slightly, like pull up a little bit on the scape just to kind of inch it out a little bit, and then you get some of that blanched scape part, and then I snap it off. I don't want to pull the whole thing straight out. Sometimes that happens, but when you pull the whole thing straight out, you kind of leave a hole right at the top. So I don't prefer to do that because I feel like water gets in there and sometimes you end up with some rot in the garlic. So what I try to avoid is getting it all the way up, pulling it up a little bit, and then just snapping it off. That little bit of the blanch part is the most tender, most delicious part. So I try and get a little bit of that. At Corvid Ravenscroft asked yesterday on YouTube, quote, "Please talk about garlic tomorrow, specifically what to look for in regards to harvesting scapes. I have a chef that wants them, but I thought I was supposed to wait until they curled before harvesting. Am I wrong in that assumption? Input needed," end quote. Well, ask that chef first what they want because I don't want to assume, but pulling them early is how you get the nice tender scapes. Waiting until they curl is how you get really curly, is how you get those kind of leathery, flower stems. Although both of those forms are technically edible, once they get that stiff, sort of curl, they get fibrous. So it's not really my thing personally. And I imagine that most chefs would feel the same way. Anyway, those scapes are a little easier to sell at market than green garlic. Usually would sell them in bunches of 5 scapes for $3 or 2 bunches for $5. Though we often sell them in bulk to a fellow farmer friend who uses them for pickles. If you allow these scapes to grow too long, they will decrease your bulb size. So it is good to get rid of them. And they become, like I said, they become more fibrous and less edible as they mature. So effectively just less marketable and less enjoyable. And also, if you leave them, they will reduce your garlic yield. So we will pop them off even if we don't plan to sell the scapes. After scapes, we enter fresh garlic stage. This is, and don't at me, the best stage of garlic. Hands down, no contest. Fresh garlic is when garlic starts to bulb, and you can see the differentiation of the bulbs, but that paper hasn't yet formed. So the bulb is still heavy and juicy, and you can use practically in the entire thing since what will become the paper later is still edible. You do have to be gentle with this stage. It bruises really easy, but in market, we often try to sell, or we did, absolutely as much garlic as possible. Because storing too much garlic can cut down on profitability, but also to me, it's just the best stage. Plus, being first to market with garlic is how you get the customers hooked on your product and your garlic for the rest of the season. And fresh garlic, to me, rules at that. We did also always make sure to let the customer know that what to expect with fresh garlic. So they weren't surprised when there was no paper there. They didn't have to take the bulbs out and then break them out of the little paper. I always call it a paper, whatever it is, the shell, if you will. If the customer wanted to keep it that way in fresh form for as long as possible, we recommended, just popping it in the fridge because fresh garlic will cure and form that sort of paper, that shell, on the countertop. And it will do that in the fridge too, but just not as fast. Then, of course, the last stage of garlic is just garlic, is cured garlic, what we think of when we think of garlic. You harvest garlic when it's about 60% brown, and then you cure it for a few weeks, at which point the chemistry and nutrition and flavor changes a bit, and you get a more stable crop that can be sold all winter. More details on harvesting and curing garlic closer to when we do that here, or you can watch our garlic video for that as well. So you could almost say there are 5 stages if you count that time before it is fully cured, but has the, kind of the paper has formed, somewhere between fresh garlic and cured garlic. Yield wise, that few weeks is not only when it's at its most delicious, also it's when it's at its heaviest. Anyway, what an amazing crop, and I look forward to every stage of garlic all year round. Love garlic. So that's it for Friday. It's soccer tournament weekend for us, for the kiddos. Plus, Brighton and Liverpool play tomorrow. So I'm in a bit of a house divided with my wife and my older son, who are Liverpool fans, but all sorts of good stuff going on, and I hope you all have a great weekend yourselves. Best of luck at the farmers market for all of those who observe. Don't forget, we at No Till Growers are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. notelgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook by me, or The Seed Farmer, written by the great Dan Brisebois, over at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over there at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout out on the show. So shout outs today: TWB Works, Tom Welsh, Mike Fairservice at Above the Dam Farm, DAM, just making sure that's clear. Stefan Tuller, could be French, Stefan. Also Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, and Chris Yates, our weeklies, are jumping in on today's story. All right, so our cave explorers, and if you know, you know, are suddenly surrounded by these glowing, warm superorganisms. And the folks fixing the plane hear these calls for help, and they go running towards the cave naturally to go save their friends. What they find, it's a little bit hard to explain in words. Their friends have been turned into rock-like creatures and are laughing hysterically with the other cave creatures. The original cave explorers explain that they had stumbled upon these creatures, quote unquote, but it's actually not creatures at all. It's just this amorphous superorganism that will climb on your skin, and it's warm and it's glowing, but is incredibly exfoliating. And it's a long tradition in this area, and that these new visitors, the cavers, should try it so they enjoy some time with the superorganisms and spend some time with the locals afterward, who are very fun and have incredibly good, lovely skin. Never know what you'll find in a cave. I think that's the true lesson, probably. Anyway, thanks for listening and or watching this week. We will do it again next week, starting Monday. I think that's the way we'll do it. All right, thanks you all. Bye. What are you doing? Yeah.
Easy now.